myself and you, because we are counting on you also to raise issues, to raise questions about your own observation as students in a part of the world that has been affected one way or another by the Arab Spring. Before we do that, I want to recognize 9 students from the Morocco program, from the MOR, the MOM and the MOJ program. These are the abbreviations for our program, the Multiculturalism and Human Rights program, and the Migration program, and the Journalist program. We had 9 students who were brave enough to participate in the cleaning of the city of Kenitra, which is my hometown, and the aftermath of the slaughtering of the sheep. You probably have all seen the mess that we all have left after the slaughtering of the sheep, and we had 9 students who were kind enough, sweet enough, brave enough to participate with an NGO in Kenitra that is receiving some media attention. I saw a photo of the activity that was that took place the second day of the Eid. In recognition of your efforts, the center is offering you pins. So these are tiny pins with the logo of the center. So I'm going to call on the following to receive their pins from Nawal. You call in recognition. And passage. Corinne was there too. Corinne. Yeah, I want you to stand up so they can see you too. And Jerusalem. And Ash. And from the migration program, I had Alana. Is she here? Okay, we'll keep it for her. And Helen. Helen also was, we'll keep her pin for her. Let them know. From the MOJ program, I have Takori. Sorry, I can't. Aisha. Okay, we have her pin for her. And Michelle. Michelle is also here. So we have these things. Please let them know. They can come and collect their things. And once again, thank you very much for doing this. And I was going to tell you, looking forward to your participation again next year, but maybe this is asking too much. Okay, so we also have Su'ad. Please, can help me. Okay, so we have three participants and myself. You can have a seat. Su'ad is the AD, our lovely AD from the migration program. The risk seekers, the journalist is already here. So this is how we will proceed. As you already know, or know, since 2011 was a very unusual year for this part of the world. For the first time, the Arab world has witnessed something that resembles revolution. There is still a debate as to whether we are talking about revolutions or protests or forms of political change. But in any case, these events that happened in 2011, and they were sparkled by by Bouazizi, who is a street vendor in Tunisia, who burned himself in December 2010. And as a consequence of this event, we had several authoritarian leaders who were toppled in their countries, starting with Ben Ali in Tunisia, followed by Mubarak in Egypt, followed by Gaddafi in Libya, and also followed by Ali Saleh in Yemen. In addition to these key figures in the Arab world, who have been in power for several decades and who were toppled, you also had demonstrations and protests that spread throughout the Arab world and that have led some changes In the case of Morocco, it led to the adoption of a new constitution, and it led to government changes. It led to initiatives by governments in other countries, such as in Saudi Arabia and in Bahrain and in Algeria, to increase social spending and also to promise economic development in the future. So I would say that 2011 was the period of the toppling of regimes by popular demands and popular participation, something that has been unusual in our part of the world. And because of this, the literature has associated these kinds of events with revolutions, with the springs that have led in other regions in the world, such as in Eastern Europe particularly, to the revolutions that led to the post-communist, post-authoritarian regimes. The second phase in this part of the world was associated with elections that took place in various forms, be it in Egypt or in Tunisia or in Morocco. And the significant feature of these elections, and in Libya as well, the significant features in these elections is that we have noticed the marginalization of the groups that were very vocal, that were of liberal tendencies, that helped in initiating and leading the first phase of these protests and demonstrations, and the rise and the emergence of the Islamic movement, the Muslim Brothers, in their different appellations. But these are political parties that have been in opposition in all these countries and that have been calling for the adoption of strict interpretations of the religious text in the field of politics. This was also new for the first time. These kinds of political parties were brought to power by popular votes and on the basis of the ballot box. That was phase number 2. And then phase number 3 was started in Egypt with what is now debatable also, which is whether it is a second revolution or a coup d'etat, but the results of the intervention of the military in Egypt this year led to the toppling of the first elected president that Egypt had known in its history, and its replacement by a president who is being appointed, and the re-emergence of the military once again in Egypt as a key political actor. This coup in Egypt, or the counter-revolution, or a second revolution, depending on how you stand on this, had an effect on the rest of the Arab world and on what we call the Arab Spring. And the effect of this coup in Egypt is that the Islamist movement is now on the defensive, and that there are various forces, including forces from the states, from the term that has been emerging very forcefully now is the deep state. These are the interests that were linked to the former authoritarian regimes, but also business interests, the military, the media, that are attacking and cornering the Islamists and calling, in certain cases, for the abolishment of their political parties, as is the case in Egypt, and as some voices have demanded in Tunisia, to a much lesser extent in Morocco as well. This is the third phase where we are right now. The excitement and the excitement that was associated with the sparkling of the first Arab Spring seems now to move towards what is going to happen. Are the Islamists now on the defensive? Are they going to be evinced from political power? What social forces are emerging or are going to emerge? And we are seeing that these kind of issues are being negotiated in various countries, depending on the context of each particular country. We are very lucky to have with us Dr. Raed from Jordan. We are also very lucky to have with us, I see that some of the participants who promised to be with us are here. We are also very lucky to have with us Dries Siekes, a journalist and playwright, and also the director of the editor-in-chief of a very influential magazine in economics. He's wearing all kinds of hats. And so he's also going to respond to these issues, his own reading of the Arab world or Morocco, depending on what he wants to focus on today. And then we have Su'ad. We are also from Morocco, and we are very lucky that Saeed Griwi, who is the dean of the SIT programs in the Middle East and Europe, is with us, and we are expecting to hear your wise words on these issues as well. So let me start by giving first the floor to, I'm just doing this arbitrarily. Let's give, since Dries, you are sitting there, and you look as confused as we are all, to share with us your thoughts and even confusions if you have about these issues. And then I'll give the floor to Raed, our guest from Jordan, and he will be followed by Su'ad and then by Saeed. And you can have up to 10 minutes, but we are counting on you to ask questions and go from there. So, Dries, thank you for taking the time to come, and the floor is yours.
Hi. Well, this is, it's not easy to respond to this question. So I'll try to tell you a few things, mainly starting from what's happening in Morocco, about what Abdelhai was talking about, which is the aftermath of 2011. The first thing I think which is very important to talk about is that representation is one. I mean, I'm going to more raise questions than give answers for the time being, because we need first to find the right solution, the right questions. So I'm trying to find the right questions. I'm not sure for the time being that the plurality of expressions in society is really reflected by representation. This is one first big question. Because actually, not only because what happened in internet then in the street was not necessarily reflected by the ballots and by elections, but also because we realized that what we call the intermediary court of political parties are far from being a reflection of the dynamics within society, and the dynamics even of what we call civil society, or what we call opinion leaders also in civil society. So there is a gap. There is a gap between this plurality, this variety in expressions in society, and what is there as representative bodies and institutions. This to me is the first big question, because it's at the same time a reflection of the crisis of representative democracy, which is the case in other countries, but we are not in democracy, we are still in an autocracy. We are looking forward to move to democracy, but we're at the same time trying to find the best way to have the largest participation to the construction of democracy. So while we're trying to have the largest participation to this construction, we realize that our political parties are very exclusive of different expressions. So this is one big problem. The second problem we have is, and it's in a certain sense a consequence of the first one, is that we have what we call the deep state, which is in Morocco the Makhzen, and which is maybe in Egypt the military spirits, and and could be something else in other countries. This deep state, with its interests, with its not transparent interests, but not really well expressed, not transparent interests, but opaque interests, and different and not necessarily homogeneous, heterogeneous interests. This deep state is in a certain sense in confrontation with the deep society, which is, and this means that there is a void in the middle. There is a void in the middle. The void is caused by the fact that the political parties are not created for the time being to look for decision making, but just to be close to decision making. So because they need to be just close to decision making, this creates a clientelist environment. So this is, and when we look at this clientelist environment and corruption, and the fact that there is a lack of competition within the economic sphere, and the fact that there is a weak social state. I'm talking about social state as a concept, the state which is takes care of more equity within society. Because of all this, this may create more turmoil in the future, because we don't have enough because the social demand doesn't have a good intermediary institution that will really defend it. So that's why I'm talking about confrontation between deep society and deep state. The third element is about the individual and the collectivity. We realize that there are more and more big battles about individual freedom, We looked at this story of Nabor kissing, Daniel Gates pedophile affair. It's all the time the question of individuals being today more and more big, public topics, and where we have people who are demanding more respect for individual choices. At the same time that there is this demand for individual choices and more vigilance on violence caused to individuals, we have a rise of moral stand on how we should keep consensus on within society and within the collective spirit of our moral background. I think this is also a big a question that will be socially and culturally creating more and more conflicts within society. That's why I think the need today in Morocco, for example, is for more places of public debate, more places for creation, more places for interaction within schools, associations, etc., in order to have a more liberal media, and not propaganda media, more liberal media, while we realize that we are limiting the freedom of the media. You have this case of Lakoum, for example, the last case. So we are limiting the freedom of the media, and we are not encouraging the creation of more spaces of free debate, free creation, and creating rituals of debate and rituals of creation and interaction. While this is the only way where the individuals could interact and be rationally exchanging in order to talk about their being together in the same society. For the time being, people are being together without talking to each other. People are being together because they have to. That's why we have a lot of violence. We have a lot of social violence that is there. For the time being, still dominant violence, but from now on, it raises and it becomes more visible. So I think this is also a third point where there is something tense. There is something tense in the air that will have to be solved. I'm not giving any solutions or any perspectives for the time being. I'm more questioning these points, these 3 points. I recapitulate. I'm talking about the relationship between the fact that the representation, the sphere of representation has nothing to do with the sphere of the plurality and richness of expression in society. This confrontation between deep society and deep state, and this other, the fact that we're living together, we're being together without talking to each other, and the question of dominant violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Brice. I also should recognize with us 2 ADs. Mary Stuckey, who is the AD of the journalism program, and we didn't want to include her in the last minute in this panel because she just came back from a trip overseas. And we also have Bayan Al-Haq, our other AD from Jordan. Thank you and welcome to Morocco once again. Okay, let's give the floor to Dr. Rabi.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Kifkum? Speaking of all right, so first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Abdul Hayy and his team for this great arrangement, and my thanks also for our Dean Saeed for his support to make this schedule happen in Morocco. So talking about Arab Spring, which is I'm gonna take off my hat as an AD and talk for you guys as an average Jordanian person from the Middle East. Okay? Agree? So don't say who, what strange AD this one. So first, we're talking about Arab Spring. In the Middle East, mainly in Jordan, there's even a question, are we talking about Arab Spring or Arab Fall or Arab Summer or Arab Dry Winter? So people don't think this is a spring. Many people say this is a fall. This is not really even a nice fall with nice colors for trees. You know, it's really very dark fall. In Jordan, we started our, if you want to call it spring, late 90s. We are one of the first people who started the what we call it Hirak, like the movement. In 1989, we had the first election, parliament election, after 30 years of closing that democratic issue. We had at that time, in 1989, 40% of the parliament was from the Muslim Brotherhood. And that was, if you ask any Jordanian, tell you the best parliament was in 1989. Then the government recognized that next time they might be over 50%. So they changed the election law from like a very democratic law to something called one man, one vote. Guys, I need to spend like 1 hour, 2 hours just to explain to you one man, one vote, which is very difficult. it's nowhere in the world a country has this law, but it's made quickly that if you are a district has 3 seats, you are allowed just to vote for 1 seat, not the 3 seats. Before you are allowed to do the 3 seats. This so they can control the Muslim Brotherhood, percentage. So from that time, like let's say 1994, the Muslim Brotherhood boycott the elections till this moment. And from that time, they starting, their demonstration is asking for a better election law. So this is the little history of Arab Spring, or let's say political movement, reforms, asking for reforms started in Jordan. When the Arab Spring started in the Arab countries, I think most of Jordanians, people in the Middle East, were really happy that this is the time when we're going to have those dictatorship, regimes collapse and go. So we're so happy and we're supporting and hoping that Tunisian revolution will succeed. And it happened in time of revolution started in Egypt. Everybody was good, so happy, and in Libya, Yemen, and till now Syria. So that's one thing when talking about republican system. And what about the monarchies, that's the case of Jordan and Morocco. I always say the king of Jordan and the king in Morocco are really smart people, that they read the people, the street demands early on, and they did some constitutional amendments. Morocco, they did better than Jordan, and now most of the opposition parties in Jordan, they're asking at least to level of Moroccan constitutional amendments. So in Jordan, there were some amendments, but not really meet the requirements or the demands in the opposition parties. At least here in Morocco, they did really something interesting, that if the parliament, let's say a certain party win a majority in the parliament, they can compose or constitute the government. Then the king here will appoint prime minister from that party. In Jordan, we don't have that yet, so that's the major now requirement. But there is, at the same time, there is people who are really against having this level of amendments in Jordan, because they don't need to weaken the king power in the country, and they want to still have the king has the full power of appointing prime minister, dissolve parliaments, and so this is different groups in Jordan, especially I would say the tribal or the tribes in Jordan. They still want to see the king with a good power, although there is some hierarchies, some movements from tribes, but still not in the level of wow, the king should stand and say no, we have to think seriously. It's still in a very low level of asking this kind of amendments. The good thing about Arab Spring in Jordan, that we have zero blood in the street. We have no, let's say, violence. It's tiny, it happened, but there's no killing, there's no bloods in the street. So we call it an amn na'am, the soft security, that the police department, by the government and the king, that they said let's have the soft security or the soft police, al-amn na'am. So let people talk, let people express their feelings, let them tell what they want, but do not really get in violence. There's few accidents happen, but not to the level where we think that we're going to have a revolution in Jordan. And that's the thing. When we start seeing this really a way of interaction with the street demands, people start to look to, for example, Libya, then to Syria, and say, do we need to have a situation like Libya or Syria and Jordan? So everything calmed down, and they said, let's say, be quiet and have less demonstrations till we see what happened in Syria. So for example, in 2011, we had like 4,353 demonstrations protesting. In 2012, we had 3,501. In 2013 till June, you have just 561 demonstrations. So this is very big, decrease in the numbers, and this is because of mainly Syria. And people don't need to have another Syria in Jordan. So that's one thing. Talk about Arab Spring in Jordan, guys. We talk about very big issue, which is the Syrian refugees. That's our really big concern now. We have 1.3 million of Syrian refugees in Jordan, and every day we receive people. On average, weekly we receive like 1,000. This number sometimes talk about Arab Spring in Jordan, guys. We go down to 500. So it's daily increase. Jordan's small, that's our very limited resources, and we have this huge number. We are the biggest country who receives Syrian refugees at this moment. We're expecting in 2014 to have more than 2 million. And this is the issue where the Jordanian culture and the Hashemite family, how they think of refugees, that we don't have policy. If you ask even the king, and been asked when Obama was in Jordan, what's your policy of closing your doors about in the face of refugees? He said, we can't. If a woman came to you holding a child, said, can you help me? Are you going to tell her, no, go back? Or someone who's bleeding said, please, I need help, settle it and go back. So we don't have this policy. We will not close the doors. We will keep opening our doors. So that means we're going to have more people comes. Unfortunately, they live in very difficult situation. Half of this number lives in refugees, which is very basic in refugee camps, very basic camps. Really, their situation is bad. The UN help, but still Jordan carry a lot of responsibility. We don't receive enough support from the international community. I would say the American administration, like Obama, he donated 2 times to Jordan, like around, I think now the number is about 500 million US dollar. This is a good number, but still we need more, because the cost of one camp called a Zaatri camp, which I think you read about Zaatri camp, the cost of that daily cost is 1 million. It's too much money. So 400 million is good help for just, let's say, for 1 year, and that's then. But this is for one camp. So imagine we have like 3-4 camps, and we have another more than 500,000 who lives in the cities. We still also receive help from the UN. So we are talking about a huge number, a lot of money, a lot of support that Jordanian still hope to get. We talk about Syrian refugees also. Like a month ago, we were guys even talking about that this program will be evacuated, and we're going to come here for the whole semester. Because of I think you were aware of the strike about to happen, result to the chemical weapons using in Syria against the civilian. Unfortunately, it did not happen. This is how the Jordanian think. Some people said it should happen. We have to stop this dictatorship. We have to stop the bloodshed in the region. Unfortunately, we don't need any more international interference in the region. We will be able to solve their problems in their self. But people are now talking about something is international democracy and nifaq al-dawli, that it's like they are telling Bashar al-Assad, okay man, kill the people as much you want in any type of weapons, but not chemicals. So this is how the people in the Middle East now is really frustrated from the US, even from the international community, from the UN, how they dealt with the situation in Syria. Jordan, as you know, bordering the biggest or the biggest borders with the Arab country with Syria. People, we have many tribes, shared tribes between the two countries. That's a really big issue in Jordan. We need the situation and the issue to be solved. The last thing, just talk about Arab Spring. Also, talking about unfortunate what happened in Egypt. Everybody were happy that we had this really honest election, and there is the first time a president to be elected, and with Islamists in the power and the coup happened, now Jordanians are saying, guys, we have to step back, we have to think serious about the situation, and even the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan, they start to think seriously about the situation, and there should be lesson learned from what's going on in the region. So I would like to stop here, and I would be very happy to answer any questions, and also I would like you guys just to talk about your experience. What do you think of the Arab Spring as a youth, American, even might be there's non-American in the group, like a youth people from the West, just what do you think of Arab Spring? Some people, they call it now post-Arab Spring. Jordanian, they said we not yet even received the Arab Spring, some people. So it's a big issue now. We hope we're going to have a better situation in the region, especially talking about Syria and in Egypt now, which many people daily die in Egypt result to the coup, but inshallah things will improve and get better. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahid. One thing that we somehow should find the time of answering at some point is that the victims of the Arab Spring were these authoritarian rulers that were that used to constitute the key leaders of the Arab republics. It is the Arab Republic. The Republicans have the Republicans, not in the American sense, but the Republicans in the sense of those who are carrying a different agenda than the monarchies. It is them who have fallen. And the monarchs, up until now, they have been able to withstand this wave of the Arab Spring, or first wave of the Arab Spring. So thank you, Dr. Raid, very much. And I'll give the floor to Sran.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, I'll be, just talking about a few points that do not make a coherent, presentation, but just to go back to also some of the things that were mentioned by the previous speakers about this shift from the virtual to the street, and how different, the gap that you can see for this country. It was very striking to watch the difference between those who actually were on Facebook and those who took to the street. I was last summer, summer 2012, in a meeting where this Facebook youth were invited, and most of them, there's definitely, they were a very heterogeneous group in the sense that you find a student from, what is the school in Paris? Sciences Po, Paris, that is one of the prestigious political science schools, and then you have students from Fez, from Meknes, different social backgrounds, and they all were there to say we got together because we want to reclaim this country that was taken over by Makhzen. But then the answer to the question, what is Makhzen exactly? What do you mean by Makhzen? It wasn't. I think it's a concept in this country that refers to central power, but also it's very hard to identify what you mean exactly by Makhzen. People tend to use that term a lot, and without really, the answer, what is it exactly? I think it's not, it's a question that I don't have the answer to, but I think the people who were there contesting Makhzen were not also able to identify what it is exactly. And so that's, but also the shift was in terms of the people who actually went to the street. So you see, those who fight for liberal freedoms, together with, a branch of, Islamists in this country, would bring this two groups together. It wasn't very clear. I mean, the only thing that brought them together that they are against authoritarianism in this country, but I'm not sure if they could sit and talk to each other because how divergent, I mean, their views are. I mean, like really the two extremes in this country, like radical liberals together with the radical, for this country, I mean, Islamists. So those who are, I mean, so you see on the same, march, people who are advocating secularism and those who are talking about return to Sharia, etc. But also, I mean, this group was also very much criticized on the basis that the same person who will be walking in this, protests movement or taking part in it, advocating democracy, they're the same people who will not even stand on a line. So how and respect, the fact that you came late, so these people, or how they relate to to the members of the family or to the female in the street, etc. So the contest, the criticism was based on the fact that you need to build up this culture of democracy at home. In how you behave in everyday life, and then start talking about reforming the system and talking about political democracy. That it will not really work to start advocating democracy. So that the culture is not really there. We are, a country with a dominant patriarchal, authoritarian culture at home, and that's, you need to look at that before you actually take in a street demonstration for democratization of the country. The other thing I think it's like about this heterogeneity that for this country at least, it was, also it had pockets in different parts of the country, so it's not like, as mentioned, this meeting had people from different, social background outside the country, those who are, studying in Europe. But also, for different regions, it meant different things. Last week, with the migration group, we were in the Rif region, and we were told that there was. Now on the news, there are demonstrations in not very far from where we were in Husima, and we were told that there's a very strong in that region. Very strong, attachment to the memory of that. The northeast of Morocco, it has its own history, its own connection to central power. Basically a very tense relationship with central power. And there was even the beginning of a republic, that lasted a few years, called Rif Republic. And people still have that memory of a hero that led this battle against the Spanish, who defeated the Spanish army. So people would, stand, like young people who are part of this protest, but they're not, connected to any, national movement, would stand up in his house. There's like the ruins of his house, and hold his pictures, and together with the Al-Nazir flag. So that also shows, something that you will not see, for example, in Rabat or Casablanca, or so you cannot talk about a movement in the country because people have local issues and they walk to the street with those issues, and because now they can see. It's possible to, if you go on a rally or you go on a march, you can address those issues or get the people who are responsible, address them. So there is a realization that, there is a kind of result that can be achieved out of protest, that it is possible to change things when you decide to walk in the street and say, and that's not something that, I mean, we are used to. I mean, it's something that is in the process of making, and people are learning how to do it, and I think it is happening. It is becoming like a daily thing to watch everywhere in this country. And there is hardly any, I mean, a place in the country that escapes. I mean, there are very few places in Morocco that haven't experienced street demonstrations. Very small, I mean, isolated, towns where, I mean, you hear, like you would hear about for the first time, that you wouldn't even know the name because the name would not be even on the map, but you hear there is a demonstration there because of this issue, and I think that is, I mean, in the long term, it's not going to show the results now, but it will show, I mean, probably show in long term, a new way of, relating to national issues, to politics, to change in this country. And I thank you for.
Thank you, Saad. Last but not the least is Said Grioud. And Said had first-hand information about the Arab Spring because as a dean of the region, he was in contact with several academic directors and also with potential programs that he was developing in different parts of the Arab world. So, Said, the floor is yours. You are such as the last speaker. I would also urge you to think of questions and issues that you want to raise immediately after Said's contribution.
I think I will start with questions myself. All right, maybe the first thing is just to acknowledge the presence of the Jordan programs in Morocco as a consequence fundamentally of some of the gestations that are taking place in the region. And this excursion of the Jordan programs here started actually as a preparation for a contingency evacuation plan in case the strikes went ahead against Syria, and the potential implications of that not only on Syria but also on neighboring countries, which is very interesting because in many ways it highlights obviously the interconnectedness of politics in the region, and it's becoming more and more difficult to isolate like nation states when it comes especially to big events such as the revolution that we're talking about. There are quite a few. I would like maybe to limit my intervention here to a few remarks. One, the first one is that no matter what, I haven't seen like multiplicity of perspectives in terms of just the take about what the Arab Spring means or the implications of this. There is obviously a huge shortage of female voices just in terms of what's been happening and what are the implications of this. There is obviously also a heavy predominance of political science approach. I am sure that other perspectives like arts, as a case in point, would definitely also be very helpful in terms of just what are the implications of this. Unfortunately, I have also seen more like references written by scholars outside the region than by scholars from the region, which is also, in many ways also adds to the bias, against just like how we approach and how we deal with this. Now, what do we make out of this? This is like obviously a very, young event in the region, and it is too early and too soon for any to make a comprehensive sense of what is happening. We definitely seem to have very short memory just in terms of like how revolutions happen and what are the implications of that and how that basically spreads out over time and space. And there are like many and plenty of examples in history just over how revolutions have developed and also the implications of that, including one dominant reading just in terms of what we see happening now in the region and how like phases of revolutions seem to almost always be followed by some form of, let me just call it chaos or disorder, like post-revolution. And what are the implications of that, which obviously and logically, quote unquote, would also require the people's desire for the restoration of that order, for the restoration of some sort of order, which by extension would also lead to, or may lead, at least not, in a very, not in any deterministic way, but also may lead to a change or a reconfiguration also of political management in the region. And this is basically what we are seeing now in the region. If we want to apply this theory, then the fact that what's happening, what's happened and what's still happening in Egypt makes sense, given the fact that whether we think of it as a coup or as a counter-revolution or a second revolution, the fact is that also there were more than 30 million people out on the streets calling for maybe not a change of regime, but at least I think what I seem to have read through the lines was also this call for a restoration of order. And it's a very difficult phase for people to manage. Historians most often bring up the case of the French Revolution and the famous historical figure of Bonaparte as one major sort of like sample of people's desire for order following a revolution, and that order usually yields some form of authoritarian political management. So whether this is what is happening in the region, whether this is what we are witnessing in the region, will remain to be verified, of course, within the next years and decades. So this is one aspect. Now, what kind of sense do we make out of this? I think one of the sort of like theoretical or conceptual angles from which I've been looking at the Arab Spring, quote unquote, and I seem to have been stuck by the way in this political angle, conceptual angle, probably because I am by nature optimistic, so I think I would like to stick with this, so instead of moving into some kind of obscurantist, like uncertain like conjectures about what's happening. And the theoretical framework that I am referring to is one that was developed actually by a French philosopher, Alain Badiou. And Alain Badiou talks about what he calls the events, l'événement. And Alain Badiou provides, let's say, as case in point for this event, or for the the French Revolution. And what he would argue is that the French, like an event such as the French Revolution, is important not only in itself as an event, but also as importantly, if not more importantly, thanks or due to the resonances, what he calls the resonance, the resonances that the event provides or generates. So, of course, if you look at the French Revolution obviously is not to be summed up in the Prise de Bastille on July the 14th, but also and primarily in the resonances that took place after the event, and which obviously later would materialize in the development of quite a few other things that we have inherited as a whole, including this notion of human rights, and of course the development towards a more participatory form of governance. So I would like personally to stick to this line of approach in terms of what is happening in the region, and while there are, of course, different paradigms out there in terms of how we need to read what's happening, especially the case of Egypt really seems to have trust the whole sort of like theoretical approach and any theoretical approach into reconciliation, just in terms of what is it that we are witnessing at this point. I would like to stick to the fact that these are mere resonances of what is happening in the region, and that eventually, because also what is very important about any revolution, is that it really constitutes a shift and a major shift in everything, in paradigm, in approach, in thought, and as far as I'm concerned, primarily also in consciousness. So I don't think that people who do a revolution will definitely be different after the revolution than before the revolution at all levels. And that shift in consciousness is obviously like also the opening of new options and new alternatives like moving forward. So there is, when we talk about the Arab Spring, from my humble perspective, I think what is important is the fact that that brought in like a major shift in consciousness in the region. And one element, by the way, that we can't highlight enough is the fact that the element of fear, like now is very much bracketed in the region. If we're thinking pre-revolution, fear was basically the dominant factor in terms of how people related to the state, how people related to one another, how social groups related to each other, and also that had an impact on quite a few other things, including like aspects of culture and aspects of creativity and so on. And I think the revolutions have contributed to bracketing that element of fear, and we see this manifested like at different levels in the region. I would like also, in the midst of this, to reference what I think like is one of the best readings that I have done like over the last few weeks or month about this. Unfortunately, up until now, this reading is in Arabic, so this will be probably available only to this to Arabic. But the author of this piece is Abdelhey, and I'm actually very happy to. He has this piece that came out just recently in this journal called Amran, and the title of this piece actually is Transitional Justice and Liberal Authoritarianism. The case of Morocco. And what this piece does, though it does not address like the politics of the Arabic region, it addresses like fundamental variables that we now see across the region, namely the relation of the state to its people, and within that, of course, like the elements of violence, the elements of transitional justice, the elements of transition to democracy. And the case of Morocco, which is also very interesting, and I think this is an argument that needs to be documented. There is definitely like a lot of truth in this. When we look at the region, Morocco talks about the exception, like to Jordan. In Morocco, also we talk about the exception in Morocco, even if there were youth protests. I don't think that anyone would sort of like look at Morocco as a country that has experienced the revolutions in the same way like in Libya or Syria or Egypt or Tunisia. And there are many theories as to why that was the case. But I think what this piece also advances is that the fact that Morocco had a truth and reconciliation like phase in the early 2000s may have been a major variable in terms of like attenuating or bracketing or preempting, I should say, preempting the any form of social uprising as in the form of the revolution that happened during the Arab Spring. Now, truth and reconciliation, of course, it's the fact of the state, coming forward and acknowledging all the violence that it has committed against people, against its own people, against the people, its citizens, over a period of time, and also providing like not only promises but also providing like legal, setting in place legal institutional procedures to prevent that from happening again, and to, of course, like guarantee that the transition would be to a more democratic form of governance. The article, of course, argues very convincingly in how the case of Morocco is very exceptional in the sense that this truth, because this transitional justice, let's call it, did not necessarily lead to like the establishment of a democratic form of governance, as it happened in quite a few other places like Argentina or South Africa or even Chile. But there is truth, like in the fact that the violence, state violence, having been made public and discussed publicly, and victims of that violence having come forth and made their grievances, and the state acknowledging that and proceeding with compensation, may have actually changed the mood in country in a way that sort of like preempted the happening of the big eruption of uprising, such as they happened in Libya or Tunisia or Egypt or Syria. Because if you look at those regimes in comparison to like Moroccan like political management over the last at least 15 years, we definitely see like some distinctive features in that those regimes were more sort of like limited in terms of the space that was available to the people in the country, where from you have like people's options in that manner. So I just wanted to acknowledge this as one of the like most insightful sort of like pieces that I have read about the events in the region. And I will finish, if I have like 2 minutes, by just tying this to what does this mean to all of you? Like the study abroad, like the students. And I'm also very happy to see that also like someone involved in the administration and management of programs in the region has many calls that I get from your parents and from your schools and from whoever, like what's happening in Morocco? It's like, my God, Morocco, you're taking them from Jordan to Morocco. What guarantee do you have that Morocco is safer than Jordan? I have no guarantee, by the way. But as you know, the equivalent to this is that actually there is more interest in the region than ever. And just if I can break this up, I'm happy also to say that there are more students of the study abroad programs in the region in the spring than there were this fall. So that is a very interesting thing. Now, what does this experience mean to you? I think this is a wonderful time to be a student in the region. And what I said about the change in individual consciousness definitely applies also to you as a student in the field, in the region at this point. Before the Arab Spring, before the revolution, like consciousness, really consciousness in this part of the world was like what I would sort of like qualify as a consciousness that was always on the defensive. Remember that people in this region have been subjected and submitted to all forms and all kinds of violence, symbolic and otherwise, for at least like the last 100 years. If you come from the colonial experience to despotic and repressive regimes, to of course what's been happening over the last 2 decades in terms of like terrorism and the association of terrorism with the region, and all the impact that that had on the consciousness in the region. And 3-4 years ago, we would be talking to an individual, a citizen in the region, and chances are they would be, trying to argue that they were not terrorists, trying to argue that they were not, part of all the stereotypical images that you assume, have brought with you. I think now there is a different shift in this, and I feel that people here are no matter what, they are proud to talk about what's happening in the region. They are proud to think that finally they are taking action in a way that pertains to them, and they are proud to talk about it. And they are even more proud to talk about this to you, because we know there are students, from Europe, not only from outside, but also your students from a world that has for decades actually looked at them as associated them with terrorism and all kinds of stereotypes. So this is a wonderful time for you to be in the region, and I think what we have seen in terms of just like the independent study projects over the last 2 or 3 years is also being more evidence just in terms of how important this experience is. I think I will stop right here, and thank you very much again for
Before giving you the floor, I would like to mention to you that we used to have the impression that there is no way for us to make any sense of revolutions because of a statement made in the early 70s by Zhou Enlai, who was the premier of China. He was asked in the early 70s, what can you make of the French Revolution? And he said, it's too early to tell. And since then, people were discouraged from making any sense about revolutions. However, in a recent account of a biographer, he said that is a misquotation, because when Zhou Enlai was asked this question, there was a problem with the translation, and he understood the question as referring to the May '68 protests in Paris. So we are happy that we can make sense of events, even if they are not that old. Because on this note, if you have any questions or issues and remarks you want to make, please don't hesitate to take the microphone. Okay.
On the it's too early to tell issue, sort of to the panel as a whole, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, there's a great deal of support. One of the things that Dr. Rad has talked to us a great deal about in Jordan is the Turkish model and the role of moderate Islamism coming out of an authoritarian, hyper-secular system. I'm wondering what the panel's thoughts are on the Turkish model and how it relates to the processes going on in the Arab world right now, especially given that not only right now there's a moderately Islamist government, but in the past there was a coup every decade, and the process by which Turkey left Ottoman, sultanate and became moderate Islamist democracy was fraught with a lot of those issues, a lot of things that seem to be resonating right now in Egypt. So I'm wondering what the thoughts are on that.
I'm going to take advantage of the culture that Suad referred to, which is the continuation of authoritarian culture in Morocco, and I'm going to make this authoritarian decision. I'm going to collect some of your questions because we are short in time, and then at the end I will give the floor to the panelists to answer these questions at once, rather than having the panelists responding to each question individually. Okay.
So I'm curious, just what do you guys think the role of us as non-Arabs, as Americans, as outsiders is both now in terms of what's happening in the aftermath of the Arab Spring and in the next 10, 20, 30, however many years as we are doing more professional things, especially based on the comment about there not being a lot of local voices talking about what's going on and more having outsiders defining it.
Okay. I see a hand being raised.
Yeah, I was wondering, in Jordan and Morocco, there's a lot of tourism, and if you could talk about the role of tourism in maybe deterring mass revolution and possibly overthrow of monarchy in both countries.
Okay. 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 We have okay.
It was briefly mentioned the role of the women's rights and women's movement
as far as the Arab Spring is concerned, and I'm just maybe you could elaborate more on how you see changes in the structural and societal in society versus the political change, and if you think maybe I think it's too early to tell, but what do you foresee, I guess, as that would be practical for these societies and values and such?
They're all Jordanians. They talk more than ours.
Sorry for taking one question, Morocco. I just want to first of all thank you for your time. You guys have been very enlightening to me. I guess my question is regarding sort of a U.S. sentiment towards our revision of our own history, and that the U.S. often forgets that we have 250 years of democracy formation that was less than peaceful at a lot of times, considering our 4 or 5 year long civil war in the 1860s. And I was just curious if the panel could discuss just perceptions of democracy formation in the United States in relation to the Arab Spring, and if there's anything that Americans can learn, third party, on how we can positively affect the Arab Spring or affect democratic change.
Okay, Morocco students, please don't mislead the Ra'id. You talk, right? You have questions. Okay, thank you.
I can speak up. Do you think it's possible for there to be a permanent democracy under a monarchy or a democratic monarchy?
You see why we don't allow our students?
And along with that one, just the role of secularism, the increasing secularism in governments, and whether that's necessary for the development of democracy.
Okay, who wants to take the floor first? I'll give the floor first to Ra'id, and then we'll go along this.
Thank you guys for the comments, questions. طبعا Turkish model is a model that we hope to have in the Arab countries, especially first thing in Egypt. Unfortunately, they did not give them the time to implement the Turkish model. I think Morocco, hopefully, inshallah, in their way to have this great model, which is, talk about secularism and Islamist ruling the country. I think that's really great model. You guys is just, we hope that you know more about the reality of this part of the world, convey the message to your people back in the US or anywhere in the world. Let them know what really are the Arabs and Muslims and what the Arab Spring can do for this part of the world. Permanent democracy in monarchy. The question in monarchy, even non-monarchist countries, is there anything that people can help to have a real democracy? I think the successful examples of Jordan and Morocco, I would say yes, there is a good way of having democracy in monarchy, especially with what's going on in the region. But I think one major thing that Jordan people ask for, let's say the opposition parties, is the constitutional monarchies. They are looking for a scenario like Spain, for example, or the UK, where, okay, the monarchy are very important there, but they are not interfering in the politics or the daily life or economic of the country. So that's might be will be that yes, we will have a democratic regimes if we have a constitutional monarchies. Yes, because there's a good examples like the UK and other many countries in Europe. Yeah, that's it. Tourism. we're highly affected, especially with Syria guys, and I'm talking about Jordan. But we is safe. Jordan is a very safe country, very stable. We were thinking of moving or evacuating the program if the strike happened, because we are thinking that there will be millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people will run to Jordan. But that doesn't mean we are not safe. We're very safe, very stable country, and this is why we're still there. If it's not safe, we'll be here for a longer time. This is an excursion we used to do it to Egypt, but because of revolution, we moved it to Turkey. Then the US government put a travel warning on Turkey, which is by law we can't go. Many of your schools don't allow for us to travel to a warning travel country. So Jordan is safe, encourage people to come, they like it. And as Saeed said, we really are guys who are lucky to come to this part of the world at this time. It's a great experience, we hope, for everybody.
You told us that you went to Egypt and then there was a revolution in Egypt.
Yeah, we went one day.
You went to Turkey and then Turkey had problems. What should we expect?
We went one day. I went with 33 students, just like before even the election in Egypt, like between the revolution and the election. So we did it once.
I think about, the question of secular groups. I think in this country at least, but maybe it's also for the whole region. The groups that have secular agenda, I think they lost lots of their credibility. The project for secularization or secular groups or liberal groups have been for a long time. Carried by, especially, the political left is dying, and I think that that's also, for some people, even from the secular groups, are saying that the only the people who have the same project for, reform project for more, justice, more, less. Disparities are the Islamist groups, but who are also facing, after what happened in Egypt, what we heard about in terms of, whether they should, they will survive or not. So I think there is a lot of confusion around, what it means to be secular, or the opposite, an Islamist. What does that mean? And a lot of people also here are kind of talking about going beyond these dichotomies, but we're not sure how you can do that. But also I think, I would join everyone for telling you, that this is very interesting times in this region. But also that maybe the way you are going, your projects will also not only tell us about, or educate us about what is really happening, but also like for people who are studying this region, it might also change the way it is approached. Do we keep the same categories? So Middle Eastern studies, does that still make sense as a category to put this region in one single entity and talked about in terms of authoritarianism, patriarchy, etc. Or what is happening also will affect how we study this region. I think it's also fascinating that you're here now and you are studying and learning about these issues and when it is happening. That's
okay, please.
Yes. Let me start with the role of moderate Islamism and Turkey as a model. I think we're a bit misled because Turkey first has a long secular secularist story, secular history, I mean, forced by the states from above, but at the same time a strong economic growth history thanks to the fall of the Berlin Wall and all that came from ex-USSR republics. I think that's we have to read again the history of the contemporary Turkey to realize that there was a big opportunity in this the last 20 years, and that it had a big impact on the way it developed. Added to that, it's a strong military power, a regional military power, which is an ally of the United States in the region that was looking for for its own possibilities of positioning itself differently in the region, and it happened to do it thanks to the Islamists and thanks to this balance they're trying to have between different elements. I think that's very, very. I mean, there are many elements of local context that don't allow me to talk about a model because I think there are too many disparities between the case of Turkey and other countries, either Egypt or Morocco or whatever. Still, I mean, the only point where we can compare is the advent of Islamist parties in the elections. But this is just one consequence of a big event, and I agree with Said on the notional events. I give you another reference, is Michel de Certeau. Michel de Certeau, who's another French sociologist and anthropologist who did a big work on 1968 revolution and on the event and on the way people are taking the floor. I think the elections after 2011 are just a small event. They're not a very. It's not a big event as 2011 revolution or insurrection or movement were, and that's why I'm not sure we can take either PJD in Morocco or the Muslim Brotherhood case to compare with Turkey. Somebody talked about the fact that there are not enough voices. Maybe I don't totally agree with this assertion. Maybe one of the things that is starting now is the rise of a new public opinion. And the rise of a new public opinion having more impact on public decision is something new in the region. That we are looking at what's happening in Morocco. In this case, that's very interesting. I think in Tunisia also it's very strong. So I think it's not the idea of having enough local voices. The idea is how many local voices are enough heard and are influential enough in the public sphere. So I think something is changing in this regard, but of course there is a lot of resistance from authoritarian regimes and from neo-authoritarian regimes in the region. So there is a dialectic in this about I think in this regard that's very interesting to observe. I talked about the relationship between change in society and change in political sphere, but one thing I want to add, I'm not sure they are going on the same pace. We're not going on the same pace. I think societies are changing in a much faster way than the political institutions and the political establishment can change. But at the same time, it depends what we're talking about. When we talk about, for example, in Morocco, I realized that the palace and people who are around the king are more reactive than political parties are reactive towards what's happening in the streets. So that's why I'm going back to what I said earlier. It's the idea that we need to have a stronger intermediary actors within the political sphere. That's a big question. For the time being, there is a lot of, there isn't enough, we're not really on the same pace. So that's a big problem. Okay, well, the comparison with the United States is interesting because actually when you read Tocqueville, and when Tocqueville made his book about the French Revolution, he explained how the resonances of the ancient regime were still there for 50 years, till after Napoleon Bonaparte, and how it was still there within society. The second point Tocqueville says is the fact that after revolution there is always the advent of conservative groups and conservative action within the political sphere. This is something also we're experiencing. The third element, I think, is to know that in the United States there have been 10 years of civil war before they agreed on what to do in election form. I think these are, to us, for those who know, it's very important to compare with other societies to know one thing to me, that democracy is a process. It's an infinite process, an endless process, and it's not only procedure. It's not only procedure. While for the time being in the Arab world, we feel like it's used as a procedure, either by the regimes, by the authoritarian regimes, or it's also used as a procedure by the political parties that want just to hijack power and not really create a democratic space. This is very important. This means that the big challenge for us is how to create a cultural democracy and how to create social democracy within our societies, and not only democracy as a procedure and as elections. So this is what, to me, one of the most important things. The last point I want to add is about whether monarchies could have. Is there any? I think the question is not monarchies being democratic or not. Even republics could be undemocratic, and that's the case in many countries. The question is whether we can move in authoritarian regimes to. Okay. The question is whether we could move from authoritarianism to a more fair regime. And this doesn't have to do with the fact that we're in a monarchy or in a republic. This has to do with how influential and how powerful people who want to keep the status quo are. It could be the military people, it could be the Muslim people in our country, it could be people, it could be different from a republic or monarchy, but how influential those who want to keep the status quo are, and how influential are those who want change. This is the biggest question to us. And just Régis Debray, another French philosopher, he said something I think very important. We have to be very careful with the word of democracy, because sometimes we can have plutocratic democracies, we can have theocratic democracies, we can have corrupt democracies, we can have so we have to be very careful. It's not only the question of democracy. That's why I'm scared by the procedures of democracy, where they are used, for example, by people who are undemocratic in the way of thinking. Thank you.
Okay, while we are not able to answer all your questions, I think that the objective of this session was to trigger some of these questions, and also if you are, those of you who are visiting us from Jordan, if you are at the same time as we are now thinking and considering independent study projects. And I hope that the comments that we have heard contributed in inspiring you in developing an idea or in pursuing an idea further when you do your ISP. I also think that by spending 15 weeks of your lives with us, you are unquestionably going back home more knowledgeable about us and about yourselves. Much more knowledgeable than if you hadn't been here, much more knowledgeable about this region and also about yourself by not being here. So thank you for being brave enough to take the time to come and share your 15 weeks with us, and I wish you all the success in your lives. I also thank the panelists for taking the time of being the time.